Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to episode 5 here of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. Again, I'm Brady. Got my co host Mitch here. We have been breaking down so far each team in the NFL, kind of grading how their offseason went, grading how their previous season went, their offseason, and then what we think they're going to do next season. We have the first two videos where we broke down the whole NFL schedule up already, as well as we have the first two teams we tackled. We're going in alphabetical order here, so we went with the Arizona Cardinals first and the Atlanta Falcons second. Two teams that neither of us really expected to live up to playoff caliber, but now we're talking about, I think, arguably one of, if not the Super Bowl contender, the Baltimore Ravens. And we have another playoff caliber team in the next episode. We're going to tackle the Buffalo Bills. So for all you Ravens fans, tune in. Please feel free to email us with your thoughts and stuff on how this upcoming season is going to go for you guys. You can reach us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's fourth spelled out FOURTH, string SP@gmail.com. Send us, your thoughts, anything like that, comments. And then Buffalo fans, hey, we're taking you on Saturday, so you guys will probably see this video up on like Sunday or so.
And feel free to critique us. I mean, obviously these are your teams, and you'll definitely know more than us. And if we're doing a bad take about a player that you don't agree with, totally tell us. We're trying to do our best ability to fairly represent each team that we talk about. I mean,
except the Bears.
Yeah, except the Bears, but we're not trying to, talk bad about your teams. We're just trying to go with a objective view of each team.
Yeah, and these are just our opinions. Like, if any of you guys have been following the Check Down on Instagram, has been simulating the entire NFL season on Madden, and I think they had the Falcons at like 5-3 right now, and both Mitch and I had them going 4-12. So these are literally just our opinions. Who knows? The Falcons could win the Super Bowl. Literally nobody knows. We're just taking a guess here. But I think Ravens fans are going to be at least somewhat happy with me. I have them doing pretty well. Now, once they get to the playoffs, hey, who knows? Because Lamar Jackson can do everything except play well in a playoff game. So, we'll break them down. To start with the Ravens here, I want to go back to their 2018 season. I don't really know if you can do the upcoming season or the previous Ravens season, the 2019 season, without talking about that 2018 season. Because remember, when the Ravens drafted Lamar Jackson, there wasn't really any thoughts, I think, besides with Harbaugh and maybe Lamar Jackson and his agent himself, that Lamar Jackson was going to replace Joe Flacco. At least not during the first season.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think anyone thought that he was going to be an immediate starter, but I definitely think that, Lamar Jackson was going to start down the line, kind of how people are viewing Jordan Love in Green Bay.
Yeah, nobody thought he was going to show up and be Michael Vick right away. They thought he was going to sit for a season or two. But at the same time, Flacco was still on a big contract. We weren't that far removed from the Ravens winning Super Bowl 47. Flacco still looked like a solid quarterback. Obviously, we saw last season in Denver, he really wasn't. And the Ravens season started out looking like maybe they wasted that first-round pick because the Ravens started 2018 at 3-1. Their only loss being to Cincinnati. Actually, they started 4-2, and then they lost 3 in a row. And they were sitting at 4-5, and they didn't really know what to do. And I remember really how quickly it all went because it was like they lost right before their bye week against Pittsburgh, and it was like news was breaking that there was an understanding that Harbaugh was going to be gone after that season. Like they were going to let him finish the season, but then he was going to be gone afterwards, And then I don't even know if it was just pure desperation. They put Lamar Jackson in, and they rattle off 6 or 7 straight wins, fight their way into the playoffs, and get beat by, what at that time was a better Los Angeles Chargers team. But for how quickly Lamar Jackson showed up and took a 4-5 team and turned them 10-6 was astonishing. But even then, I don't know if anybody, including myself, expected the jump we saw in season 2,
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the first season of when Lamar Jackson took off, it was amazing to see that how he took them to the playoffs. And he wasn't really the passer that he was this past season, and he was mainly what we saw in college, and that was really impressive. And this season, he definitely took a step towards improving his passing, and you saw better results as the team as a whole. And I'm really excited to see what he does in year 3 if he takes another step in his development.
Yeah, and that's I mean, obviously the offensive coordinator help that they got, the changes to the offense to make it a lot more Lamar Jackson friendly, like pickups of Mark Ingram was huge. I didn't expect the Mark Ingram pickup to actually be that big. I thought Mark Ingram was an okay back in New Orleans who struggled for a really long time. And then once the Saints got their offensive line figured out a little bit, and once Alvin Kamara showed up and took a lot of weight off his shoulders, then Mark Ingram started to look like a good back. But he showed this season that he was a really good back. Now, it looks like they drafted his replacement, but I was surprised by that. Like, the Ravens have just had a really innate ability to make just ridiculously smart moves. I mean, the trade for the Rams corner, who now I'm completely drawing a blank on his name.
Michael Peters.
Michael Peters midseason that was fantastic. That worked out so well. The trade where the Rams sent him out to Baltimore so they could pick up Jalen Ramsey out of Jacksonville in that 1-2 swap just looks like the Rams were the dumbest team in the NFL for making a pick like that. They've done so much so well as an organization recently that it's super admirable to see. Like, we talk about great organizations, like we talk about the Patriots, right? Like, we talk about how good the Niners are right now. But I think the Baltimore Ravens, if we're going from like when they moved to Baltimore till now, there's not many teams who's had better top to bottom organization than the Ravens have.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely all starts with Ozzie Newsome becoming the GM there. He's definitely put them on the right path, and he's done a really good job grooming his replacement in Eric DeCosta, because he's basically just taken the baton and has run with it. And if you're a casual fan and didn't know that Ozzie Newsome retired, you probably couldn't tell. So he's been doing an awesome job, and I think it comes down to the organization at every level, knowing who they are and just being able to find and pick players, coaches, whoever who fits exactly what the Ravens represent. And it's really amazing to see.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing that was super astonishing to me was I remember watching day 3 of the draft and being like, oh, wow, the Ravens are really popping up a lot. But it wasn't until I sat down and realized it. Like, the Ravens had 4 third-round picks. Like, 4. That's astonishing. They had picks 71, 92, 98, and 106. We talk about like how much of an advantage draft picks are. They had 10 in this last draft, 4 in the third round between trades and compensatory picks. Because last season, after they lost a lot of production, guys like Terrell Suggs, guys like Zadarius Smith, that they ended up losing, their only real signing was Earl Thomas. And so they got these compensatory picks, and they drafted all across the board. Like, looking at their draft straight down, there's not many people that I dislike. There's not many picks that I go, that's going to be a shot in the dark. A lot of these are, in my mind, have the potential to be home runs. But before we even get to their draft, now that we've talked about their 2018 season, I think we got to talk about their 2019 season. Now, I was not expecting the Ravens to do as well in 2019 as they were. I was expecting them to go like 10-6 again. Like, I thought the NFL was going to catch on to Lamar Jackson. They had an offseason to do it. But I don't think the NFL realized how good Lamar Jackson was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking about Lamar Jackson. I don't think a lot of people thought that he was going to make that step as a passer, and people thought that he was kind of be like that Cordero Stewart kind of running our quarterback and just mainly be known as a runner. So I think him improving as a passer and getting Greg Romain to help out the offense definitely surprised people and definitely put them in that spot to where they won the North and made a playoff run.
Yeah, I mean the Ravens were a team that, if I remember right, and I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. I thought I had it saved. Like heading into the season, we're projected like anywhere from I think 8 to 11 wins. Like they were in that little sweet spot. I think a large part of it was that people expected the Browns to be a lot better. They expected the Steelers to be a lot better. So they thought the Ravens would be a little bit of low man on the totem pole there. I think in almost a similar fashion to like how the NFC North was last season, where it was well, the Bears are going to be really good and the Vikings are going to be really good and the Packers are going to be, and the Lions should be okay. It was kind of this huge fight where people had an idea as to who was going to win, but it turned completely upside down. And the Ravens were a huge benefactor of that. And it's nice to see the Ravens. Again, I'm going to go back to their organization here because I think that's where it's so top down. It's nice that they went, okay, this worked for us last season. We won 5 of 6 games or 6 of 7 games, and then we got booted in the playoffs. So now let's try to build the best team we can to avoid that happening. Now, they got booted in the playoffs, but that 13-3 season was one of the most astonishing seasons I remember watching, and it started out so kind of pedantic, like honestly. They started 2-0, started crushing the Dolphins, 59 points hanging up on them in Miami. They then beat the Cardinals, and then they lose at Kansas City in week 3, 33-28. I don't know if you remember watching that game. I remember watching that game. That was such a good game. Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson going back and forth at it. It was so good. And then they lose a home game to the Browns where they lose 40-25. And so they're sitting at 2-2. And I remember watching like, okay, the Ravens are who I thought they were. They're okay, but their offense isn't there, and their defense just gave up 40 points to the Browns. And then they rattle off 12 straight wins. And they finished 14-2 and with the number 1 seed. One of the most astonishing things to me, I knew their offense was good. They scored 30 or more points 8 times last season, including 4 times in a row. Like they put 30 on the Seahawks, they put 37 on the Patriots, they put 49 on the Bengals, they put 41 on the Texans. Sorry, 5 in a row, and then they put 45 on the Rams. Like, it's insane. I think like 6 of their last 9 games they put up 30 or more points. Like they're low. I can go all day on their offense. Their offense was astonishing. It was absolutely astonishing. So like I guess my question to you, Mitch, is how much of that do you think was Lamar Jackson as an athlete, and how much of it do you think it was that the NFL suffered from like Colin Kaepernick or Michael Vick Part 2, where they just didn't take this guy seriously, and the Ravens used that to their advantage?
I think it might be a little bit of both. Obviously, we got a sample size of what Lamar Jackson was in 2018, so I don't think teams really expected or didn't really know what they were going to get in Lamar Jackson when he gets a full offseason as the number 1 guy, and if he was going to develop or if he was going to be, the same guy throughout his entire career. And then I definitely think that Greg Roman had a huge influence on this offense. I mean, if you just watch, the trail that he's blazed everywhere he's gone with the quarterbacks he's worked with, they've all performed very well under Greg Roman.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
great.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the quarterbacks he's worked with, obviously he was in San Francisco, and he made Colin Kaepernick look like a star, and then after the 49ers kind of disbanded, that Jim Harbaugh era, and he goes to Buffalo, and Tyrod Taylor looks like a pretty good quarterback, and then he comes over to the Ravens and is kind of like the assistant, and Marty Mornhinweg is the offensive coordinator, and they decide to go in a new direction and bring, Greg becomes the offensive coordinator, and then we get this season of, what we just saw, Lamar Jackson winning an MVP.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the stuff that I read after, especially after Kansas City won the Super Bowl, was how could Lamar Jackson have won the MVP over Patrick Mahomes? And I think the thing that you have to remember is that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs had a really good postseason, but there were times throughout that season, and we'll get to it when we talk to the Chiefs, where they didn't look too hot. After the loss to Kansas City in Week 4, Baltimore looked hands down one of, if not the best team in the NFL. And the thing was that if you look at who they beat during that 12-game stretch, really great teams. They beat the San Francisco 49ers. They crushed the New England Patriots. They took the Houston Texans to the woodshed and didn't let up, blowing them out 41-7. Just their 2 games, home against Houston, at the Los Angeles Rams, they outscored their opponent 96-13. Just those 2 games. If you include the game against Cincinnati the week before, it's like 150 something to like 20. Like it's nothing. Or 26. It's nothing. They made cheap change of a lot of teams. I mean, if you look at quality win on the road against Buffalo, they were a playoff team. Beat the San Francisco 49ers. They were a playoff team. Beat the Houston Texans. They were in the playoffs. Beat the New England Patriots. They were in the playoffs. Beat the Seattle Seahawks. They were in the playoffs. Let's see. Lost to Kansas City. Okay, so they beat 5 playoff teams. They beat half the teams in the playoffs last season. Just like, it's astonishing to me seeing people not necessarily take the Ravens seriously or say that it's going to be a one-off because they performed so well last year. Now, who knows? Maybe the NFL is going to catch on. But if I look at the teams they have to play, and we'll break it down, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL by far. And even on, I think, even on the statistic itself, like it's ridiculously easy. They have their previous opponent's winning percentage was .438, and that's the easiest in the NFL. The next closest is Pittsburgh at .47. The toughest schedule is New England at .375. So what that means for people who don't know, or the casual fan, is that 43.8% of the Baltimore Ravens opponents had a winning record last season. So severely less than half, closer to 2/5, which means, like, realistically, the Ravens are going to play 6 games against teams who were above 500 last year, maybe. And they get that benefit, A, because the AFC North was so bad, but B, because of just who they play. They also played the NFC East last year, and that was not a very good division as well. So, but now now that we've kind of talked about their season, we obviously have to talk about their postseason. Now, I remember, the interviews and stuff with Mark Ingram and Earl Thomas and some of those other guys talking about how, they're running all the way to the Super Bowl, only to get straight up bucked by the Tennessee Titans in the divisional round of the playoffs. And they made Lamar Jackson look bad. They made Earl Thomas look terrible. They embarrassed the Ravens defense. They embarrassed the Ravens offense. They embarrassed the Ravens special teams. I mean, they let Derrick Henry throw for a touchdown pass, like, for Christ's sake. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just because it's reminiscent after a 15-1 season that we had, but that was a really bad playoff game that they played in for all the accolades we've just given them.
Yeah, it was really strange to see how bad the Ravens played once against the Titans. I mean, you just rattled off all the points that they scored on opponents, and the whole winning streak that they had, and the Titans weren't really talked about during the season, and especially going into the postseason. I mean, I don't think anyone really took them seriously. And, Derrick Henry was just able to run over everybody. And, but I think we'll go into a little bit later, but I definitely think that they definitely shored up those problems throughout their offseason, and I don't expect them to put up that kind of performance again.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and we're gonna get into it. But I think the thing that people really forget about that game is that, yeah, Derrick Henry ran all over him, but the Titans defense really made Lamar Jackson and the entire Ravens offense look bad. Like, I think Lamar Jackson threw 2 interceptions. I know one of them was on a tip, so it wasn't necessarily his fault. But it wasn't a good throw either. The Titans just made the entire Ravens offense look like how we thought the Ravens were going to make the Titans look. You know, it was such a role reversal. Like, if you took any person who knew the bare minimum of football and you played that game for them, they would say that the Titans were the 13-3 team and the Ravens were the team that limped in the playoffs, you know? That, like, it was astonishing. It was so reminiscent of the wild card Giants coming into Lambeau and beating the 15-1 Packers. And I'm not just saying that because we're Packer fans. I'm saying that because in recent memory, that's the last time I can remember such a dominant number 1 seed get absolutely demolished by an inferior team, frankly.
Yeah, I definitely don't think, there's a Packer bias in it. I definitely think it's an apt comparison. I mean, I definitely remember those 2011 Packers, just shooting up every team with all the wide receivers that we had and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely thought that, the Packers were going to go back to back. And then, Eli Manning just had to come into Lambeau and put my dreams to a halt. So I definitely think it's a really good comparison to how, the Ravens were catching on fire as the number 1 seed, and then they play against the Tennessee Titans, and you're just like, what just happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was really astonishing to watch. But I think we've hit it on the head enough. So let's talk about their offseason. The Ravens had a really interesting offseason. Their big stories aren't even like free agents they actually picked up, Like, the big stories are they franchise tagged Matthew Judon, which I think everybody and their brother saw coming. It's just what this next step is. Like, are they going to let him walk after the season? Are they going to sign him to the contract he wants? Are they going to trade him? What are they going to do with this guy? Because I don't know if the Ravens think he's worth the contract he wants.
Yeah, I definitely think the ideal situation that the Ravens want is for him to get traded and or him play another year for them and hopefully get them a ring. And then once that year's up, they can let him walk and try to find somebody better. But I definitely think it's just like what the Jaguars are trying to do with Yannick Ngakoue.
Yeah, Unique Ngakoue, and I only know how to pronounce that because of what's his name, Brandon Gowden on Madden, because I play the Texans all the time. So whenever we play Jacksonville, but I mean that was good on their part. I agree that I think they're going to try to trade him. How serious those trade talks are, I'm not sure. I haven't heard much in terms of what Baltimore's asking price for him is, but I imagine it's steep at this point. Hence no takers. But their other ones was they traded a 5th-round pick to Jacksonville to pick up Calais Campbell, which is terrifying for that team. They traded other first-round pick in 2017, right, or 2018 draft, Hayden Hurst to the Falcons in exchange for a 4th and a 2nd-round pick. I'm sorry. They exchanged Hayden Hurst and a 4th in returns for a 2nd and a 5th from the Falcons. Hurst last season, 30 catches, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's not a huge contributor in terms of their offense. They were able to get a 2nd-round pick from him. Re-signed Jimmy Smith. One of my favorite little low-key signs they had was Derek Wolfe from Denver on that defensive line. Had some serious losses. Michael Pierce left. Traded Chris Wormley. So I guess, Mitch, how would you grade just in terms of who they picked up that offseason before we even get to the draft?
Well, I think Calais Campbell obviously would definitely be one of the better fleeces that happened this offseason if the Hopkins trade didn't happen, because they absolutely got Calais Campbell for a steal, and I definitely think that at worst he'll shore up the run defense for the Ravens, And then I definitely agree with you that Derek Wolfe was an underrated contributor to the Broncos defense. But yeah, when you compare it to the losses, it's very sad to see that, Marshall Yanda, definitely a pillar of the Ravens team for the last how many years, is retiring. Michael Pierce, I think, was a underrated defensive tackle, but I definitely think his production can be replaced. And then a surprising cut was Tony Jefferson, because I thought he was playing pretty well in Baltimore. But if you're a Ravens fan and you can tell me differently, please, because I really didn't understand the cutting of Tony Jefferson.
Yeah, from what I could kind of gather from it, like I also thought that he was playing pretty well. I think the issue was that Tony Jefferson was going to want star cornerback money, and the Ravens didn't necessarily know if he was worth that. So, they also traded Chris Wormley. I think the Ravens' strength is their secondary, and I think they have bodies to give a little bit.
Yeah.
Re-signing Jimmy Smith at the cornerback position definitely helps. And I think that they found they were already really good at safety on one end and at corner at the other, that there was a little bit of give and take there, but yeah, I mean, they made a lot of just really interesting moves. The fact that just astonishes me is that they traded Chris Wormley in a 7th to Pittsburgh for a 5th-round pick. They got Calais Campbell for a 5th-round pick. So basically, they traded Chris Wormley for Calais Campbell and still got a 7th-round pick. Like, that just shows, A, how quick Jacksonville was to get him out of contract, and B, the absolute steal that was. And we'll make another comparison in a trade like that when we talk about the Arizona Cardinals, or when we talk about the Houston Texans, because Arizona basically traded Josh Rosen for DeAndre Hopkins. And I don't want to talk about it right now, but we'll talk about it when we get to Houston. So then when you take that same thing and you go, okay, so Baltimore basically traded a pretty decent, pretty okay corner to division rival Pittsburgh for a pick that they then basically traded to Jacksonville for Calais Campbell, and they still got a 7th-round pick out of it. That's mind-boggling in both how low NFL teams value their star players like Calais Campbell and how highly they value their draft picks. Or I'm sorry, other way around. How highly they value no, I had it right. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the Jaguars are definitely having a fire sale. I mean, look at the Leonard Fournette situation. I mean, he comes out and says, like, we should sign Cam Newton, and then the next day he's on the trade block. So they're basically trying to get rid of everybody there, and they're taking whatever they can get. But yeah, I definitely think throughout this offseason, it's definitely been interesting to see that how good players like Calais Campbell and DeAndre Hopkins are traded to other teams for such low compensation. And I definitely think a reason why teams are, valuing draft picks, especially with the first round. I mean, you get the 4 years and then you have a 5th year to control them. And then I think with the whole Kirk Cousins situation, you kind of see hey, I can get 1 or 2 franchise tags out of him and then move on, especially if you're talking about a running back.
Yeah, keep him around for, instead of 5 years, keep him around for 6 or 7 and stuff like that. And that's exactly what Pittsburgh tried to do with Le'Veon Bell, we saw how it worked out for both Pittsburgh, who immediately got a replacement, and for the Jets, who, are struggling as an entire organization. So I would grade the Ravens offseason as an utter success in terms of just their moves. I think what they lost on the defensive line, they regained, and what they lost in the secondary, they have backup and replacement for. The big one that worries me, and you touched on it, is Marshall Yanda, especially in an offense so predicated on the ability to run inside the way that the Ravens are. And people say, well, if you actually want to look at it, anytime a read option offense exists, the interior run with a halfback is far more important as to the quarterback running around the end. So you have to have that strong center there in order to help dedicate, understand possible run blitzes, and get up to that second level. And now that they don't have Marshall Yanda, it's going to be interesting to see how that offense responds. It's going to be interesting to see how that offensive line works now that absolute cornerstone is no longer there.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see who they pick to replace Marshall Yanda. I know that last year they drafted Ben Powers out of Oklahoma. Maybe they'll give him the shot. I know this offseason they picked up DJ Fluker after he was cut by the Seahawks after the draft. So, maybe he's the guy that they want taking that guard position. And then, we're going to get into like a couple seconds, but there's definitely a guard from Michigan who could definitely prove that he could take it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Marshall Yanda is not a center; he's a guard.
Yeah.
I apologize, but just that it's still that interior, the center part of the offensive line, with the two guards and then the center there is so crucial. So I apologize for that. But now let's break down their draft there. Again, the Ravens had 10 draft picks, which I didn't even realize they had 10, but they had 4 in the third round. First round, number 28 overall, Patrick Queen, linebacker, LSU. Just a fantastic pick. Great linebacker at LSU, can run laterally really well. You can't say enough about the kid. LSU's defense, I think, was slept on a little bit because of how good their offense was. But, man, Patrick Queen is a great pickup for the interior of that Baltimore defense.
I don't want to talk about it because Patrick Queen was available at a certain draft spot, and that certain team decided to pick a quarterback when they definitely needed an inside linebacker. So I'll move on.
The Chargers.
Yes, let's go with the Chargers. So let's move on to the next draft pick.
All right. Well, next draft pick is just as interesting and just as heartbreaking if you're a Badger fan like me and Mitch are. 55th overall, J.K. Dobbins, halfback out of Ohio State. Again, fantastic pick. J.K. Dobbins was a criminally slept upon halfback at college. And I get it. He played in the Big Ten, and, there's obviously a running back university at a little place called Madison. So any other halfback in the Big Ten isn't nearly as good as what they can produce at Wisconsin. But what he did at Ohio State was astonishing, and he really made that Ohio State offense as deadly as it was because so much of their play action reads were predicated upon on the defense having to give everybody up in order to stop him. I mean, he's a powerful runner. He's a fast runner. He's so good. It's scary. And it's scary to imagine him teaming up with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, J.K. Dobbins was definitely the second best guy in the Big Ten for running backs. Obviously, if Jonathan Taylor wasn't there, he would be number one. And then I agree with the Badgers producing great running backs. That kind of overshadows any other running back in the Big Ten. But I think also with how the offense is at Ohio State, I mean, you've got Justin Fields, who is a great passer, and he's got a ton of weapons at the wide receiver position. I mean, we saw a bunch of them come out for the draft the past couple of years. And then, J.K. Dobbins definitely had to split some carries with some of the other running backs, most notably probably Master Teague.
Yeah, he definitely did. But the thing that really astonishes me about J.K. Dobbins is that Ohio State, unlike Wisconsin, isn't known for producing first-round talent pretty consistently in terms of offensive line play, like year in and year out. Like year in and year out, guarantee Wisconsin offensive linemen drafted, if not multiple, Ohio State isn't necessarily known for that. So J.K. Dobbins, yeah, he had all those extra weapons and he had, Justin Fields and stuff like that. But I think what he did with the Ohio State offensive line, which was the weakest part of that Ohio State team, and we saw that in the game against Clemson, was absolutely astonishing. And again, I mean, this kid is going to be scary in Baltimore. But then moving on to their third round, they had some picks I liked. They had some picks I didn't. First, third round pick, they go with Justin Metabuke, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. They then go with wide receiver Devin Duvernay, wide receiver out of Texas. They go with linebacker Malik Harrison out of Ohio State. And to finish the third round, they go guard Tyree Phillips out of Mississippi State. Then to finish out their draft in the fourth round, they draft Ben Bredesen from Michigan.
And Wisconsin.
Boy. Yep, he's a Wisconsin boy. In the fifth, they go Broderick Washington, defensive lineman out of Texas Tech. In the sixth, they draft wide receiver James Proche from Southern Methodist University. I want to talk about him because I think he's a great player. And they finished their draft in the seventh round with safety Geno Stone out of Iowa. Mitch, anybody in there that you think is worth talking about in their later picks?
Definitely the two people that come to mind is Ben Bredesen. Obviously the hometown kid for us, coming from Arrowhead High School. And then unfortunately not playing for the Badgers and going to play with Michigan. I definitely think that once he was able to get into the starting lineup, he definitely was a contributor. And like I said before, when you posed the question of how they replaced Marshall Leanda, I definitely think he is definitely a contender to do it. So I'm very interested to see how he does with this kind of crazy off season for football, with COVID kind of making things, shortened and not how they're supposed to be. And then definitely the guy that you wanted to talk about was James Proche. I won't go into detail and I'll let you handle it, but yeah, I'm kind of surprised he kind of fell that far. He definitely has, one of the best hands in the wide receiver class. And I definitely think he's going to be an asset for Lamar Jackson. And hopefully, I think that he can improve that passing offense.
Yeah. Now, I agree with Ben Bredesen. I do really like the Tyree Phillips pick, the other guard they drafted from Mississippi State. I think he runs a little bit more of the spread read option type thing. He's a little bit more of an athletic guard as opposed to such a run blocker. So it's going to be interesting. It might be that they're both getting, a huge amount of reps. But that definitely seems like a position battle to watch in their offseason. I love James Proche, to talk about him. I've always really liked this guy. I don't know how many people watch, SMU football or even football in the American Conference. But if you want to watch a lot of really good wide receiver play, the American Conference is chock full of it. And James Proche was one of my favorites. In his junior and senior season, he had, if I'm doing my math right, he had like 208 catches for about 2,400 yards and 27 touchdowns in 2 seasons. Senior year, 111 catches, 1,225 yards, and 15 touchdowns. 15 touchdowns. All right. Nearly 2 a game. Well, like what? 1.5 per game, right? Stuff like that. No, I forget how long the college football season is. It was a lot more than that. But still, he was averaging over 1 touchdown per game, which is astonishing. He's a speedy wide receiver. He's only 6 foot. He's not massive, but he has great hands. He played in a spread type system down there at SMU. He obviously didn't play against the best competition. He wasn't playing against Texas or against Ohio State or against, Alabama and stuff like that. But man, what he did was astounding. And SMU wide receivers have an interesting way about them. I mean, let's take a look at the success that like Cortland Sutton has had, in the NFL. SMU has secretly built a really good wide receiver program. And I think James Proche has the ability to be that next guy in that succession. I love the kid. I can talk about the kid for so long. He had some. I'm just getting his stats pulled up here. He had some fantastic games. What I love is once he got into the starting role, like there's a clear jump from his sophomore year to his junior year. Sophomore year he goes 40 catches. Junior year he goes 93. So 50 more catches. He puts up about 400 more yards, twice as many touchdowns. He doesn't drop the ball consistently. I think he's a great weapon for Baltimore. He's probably, of all the picks, he's my favorite that they picked up. I'm so surprised by this kid, and I hope he does so well in the NFL.
Yeah, and talk a little more about James Proche. I was I'm happy that he was able to get a quarterback like Shane. What is it?
Shane Buechele.
Yeah, Shane Buechele, the transfer from Texas, and with better quarterback play. Obviously, you saw his how the last 2 seasons he's had amazing stats and stuff, and I'm glad that he was able to get a quarterback who was able to show off his talent.
Yeah, definitely. He's a good player. I'm really interested. Obviously, he's a 6th-round pick, so he's low man on the totem pole in that wide receiver room. But Baltimore doesn't have a whole lot of, marquee name wide receivers, and I think he can step in and be a really good contributor. So let's break down what we think the Ravens are going to do next season. Now, again, this was a 13-3 team. We're going to go down, break their schedule down each week, what we think their record's going to be. So week 1, the Ravens host the Cleveland Browns, and I have them losing that game. And the reason is that I think the Browns are going to beat the Ravens the same way the Titans beat the Browns to start the season. This was a Browns team that put 40 up on the Ravens last time they were in Baltimore. I think the Browns are going to be a little bit more put together, and I think the Ravens aren't really going to know what is hitting them. Now, the Browns obviously struggle on defense, but I'm going to say that I think the Browns win week 1.
I'm gonna kind of disagree with you for a couple reasons. I know you say that the Ravens might not know what to expect from a Kevin Stefanski team, but he has put on tape with his year in the Vikings, so they have a general idea of what the Browns will be bringing. And with the whole COVID thing going on and the Browns not able to have a normal offseason with their new head coach, I think they're not going to be as how you said put together as the Baltimore Ravens, who for the most part have their core together. So I definitely think with it being week 1 that the Ravens will get the win over the Browns.
See, and this is where we'll push back, and it's because Kevin Stefanski is going to want to run the ball, and he's going to want to run it with that big bruising halfback they have, Nick Chubb. And now that they've shored up their offensive line a little bit, they have a veteran presence in Jack Conklin. They have young talent in Jedrick Wells. He's going to be able to run the ball. And we talked about, the Baltimore interior defensive line, just that defensive line in general, and how's it going to look. So this is going to be, the new look Browns offensive line versus the new look Ravens defensive line, including, we're going to have Patrick Queen or whoever their starter at linebacker is going to be going heads up against Nick Chubb. I think it's going to be a great battle. I just say last time they played Baltimore, Cleveland put up 40 on them, and Cleveland didn't really do anything last season. So, if Cleveland can do that with the head coach they did have, I imagine what they're going to do with an actual head coach. So we can agree to disagree on that. Week 2, they go to Houston. I have them absolutely clobbering the Texans because I don't see how the Texans are going to put up any fight against the Ravens. They didn't last time they played, and I don't think they're going to do it again. And I like the Texans.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. I think they're going to blow out your Texans.
Yeah, I agree. Week 3, interesting matchup, home game against Kansas City. I have them losing this game. I have the Ravens starting 1-2. I think Kansas City has too many weapons for the Ravens defense. And I think Kansas City's defense stacks up well enough against the Ravens offense. I give my nod to Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs.
This is a really close one for me. And the only deciding factor is who the home team is. So I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens.
So that's interesting because you have them starting 3-0, and I have them starting 1-2.
Yeah. When you hear my full schedule, you're going to think it's interesting.
All right. Well, hey, I'm interested. So then Ravens week 4 get to play the Redskins in Washington. This is the same thing as the Houston game for me. I think the Ravens are going to absolutely demolish the Redskins.
Yeah, I mean, the Redskins do have an underrated defense, but I'm not sold on their offense yet. So I definitely think that Baltimore has a huge advantage.
All right. Week 5, they go to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. I have this as a win for Baltimore. We don't know what the Bengals are going to look like. We don't even know what Joe Burrow is going to look like. The Ravens absolutely dumbfounded the Bengals last season. I don't see anything changing this season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an easy win. I think as we put out more episodes, you'll learn I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Burrow. So I definitely think that the Ravens are going to show him what it's like to play in the NFL.
All right, week 6 at Philadelphia. Mitch, who you got?
I think this is going to be a good game to watch, but with that uncertainty with their wide receiver core and Carson Wentz's health, I think that the Baltimore Ravens are going to have a what do you want to call it? A close win over the Eagles.
Yeah, we talked about it when we broke down the NFL schedule. The Eagles have this tendency to both play up to competition, but as well as play down. And this seems like one of those games where, assuming everybody's healthy, the Eagles really have a good opportunity to play up to the Ravens and kind of prove where they're at. But I also give my nod to the Ravens here. I think more importantly than the uncertainty at the wide receiver position is the uncertainty in the secondary for Philadelphia. They addressed it to a certain extent, but not to the level that it's fully needed, as well as on that defense, the Eagles defense just was not what it typically was the last couple of seasons. So I'm going to give my nod to the Ravens there. Then week 7, home game against the Steelers. I have the Ravens winning this as well. I think they stack up really well against the Steelers and their defense. And, we don't know what shape Big Ben's going to be in for this offseason. So I'm going to give my nod to the Ravens there.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Ravens will beat the Steelers in their first matchup. With Big Ben coming back from a significant arm injury, and the running back position for the Steelers kind of being uncertain since James Conner hasn't played to what people thought he was going to be. He's been a good back, but he hasn't been a great back.
Yeah.
And then it'll be interesting to see how these wide receivers play, because I know that Juju kind of had some trouble starting off as being a number one guy. And then I definitely think that the Steelers defense will keep them in both games against the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about it when we get to the Steelers. I think the Eric Ebron pick is definitely going to help out Juju Smith-Schuster. They don't really have a number 2 wide receiver. They desperately need that. So that's definitely going to help them out. But I agree. I think it's going to be a close game, but I'm going to give it to Baltimore. Baltimore then has a week 8 bye. So they come out week 9 to get the halfway point of the season. They play the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. I give this to the Colts. I say the Colts are going to win that game. I like the way the Colts defense matches up against the Ravens. I like the way the Colts offense, with that just really strong offensive line, hopefully a little bit better, more solid quarterback play, still have T.Y. Hilton, still have weapons on offense. I like the Colts in that matchup.
I got the Ravens. I can't give it to the Colts. After seeing what Phillip Rivers did last year, I don't think he's going to be the guy that we saw when, LaDainian Tomlinson and Antonio Gates were in their prime, and, that Phillip Rivers. I think that even though he's playing with his old offensive coordinator and he has better offensive line play, I don't think he has a better wide receiver position group as a whole. So I think that the Ravens are going to beat them solely because I don't trust Phillip Rivers as their quarterback.
We'll see. Obviously, we'll have differing opinions when we get to the Colts. And as somebody who likes the Houston Texans, I hate the Colts. But I'm going to give them the nod there. So at the halfway point of the season, you have Baltimore at 8-0. I have them at 5-3. So we'll see. We'll see if we still end up meeting in the middle somewhere. Week 10, they go to New England to play the Patriots. I think once again they beat the Patriots. They made the Patriot defense, which was so good last year, look silly last season. Obviously, Bill Belichick, I don't know if he's going to let that happen again. I think it's going to be a little bit of a closer game. But with so many uncertainties on the Patriots offense, I give this to Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore's going to win. I mean, Tom Brady's gone. Even though they had a good defense last year, a bunch of their contributors are gone as well. There's no wide receiver outside of Julian Edelman. There's no tight end. And they have a solid, unheralded offensive line. But, yeah, I think the Ravens are going to be the better team in New England.
Yeah, I agree. Week 11, rematch of the divisional round game. They host the Tennessee Titans. I have them beating the Titans. I think they've done enough in the offseason to do so. I also think with some key losses to the Titans defense, like Logan Ryan and Jarrell Casey, that they stack up. The matchup is a little bit more favorable to the Ravens in the second go-round.
Yeah, I have them beating the Titans. Like I said before, I thought they did enough to improve their rushing defense, and I think they can combat Derrick Henry. And I think, this is going to be a battle of will, and I think that the Ravens are going to be more motivated to win than the Titans are going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Week 12 matchup. This time they go to Pittsburgh. Rematch of Week 7. Both of us had them beating Pittsburgh the first time. I have them beating Pittsburgh a second time. This seems like just one of those games. It could be one of those trip-up AFC North games that we see. But in my mind, Baltimore already suffered that Week 1 against the Browns. So I have them beating Pittsburgh.
This is where I give the Ravens their first loss. I think this could be a trap game for them. I mean, they're going to Heinz Field. Hopefully by this time Big Ben's on a roll and, he's found out who his wide receivers are going to be. And, I think the offense could be better than what they're going to be when they first meet up. And I think that they're going to squeak out a win against the Ravens.
Sure. All right. Well, good. I was afraid you were going to have them going 16-0.
I don't have any team going 16-0.
You what?
I don't have any team going 16-0, but I do have one team going 15-1.
If it's Green Bay, Mitch, we can't do the show. Okay, we can't be that big of homers.
No, I'll just say that I hated giving them 15-1.
It's New England, isn't it? With the one loss being to the Ravens.
Exactly.
But all right, so Week 13, a really interesting matchup. A home game against the Dallas Cowboys. This is going to be interesting. One, we don't really know what the Mike McCarthy offense is going to look like in Dallas. We know what it looked like in Green Bay, but how different is it going to be in Dallas? Two, obviously, still a huge question mark is what contract is Dak going to get? Is he going to have a contract? Is he going to walk? Nobody thought this was going to still be going on, but it is. The Cowboys didn't really do a whole lot defensively to help themselves out. Besides, signing some players who may be on the, commissioner's exempt list and stuff like that. I have the Ravens winning this, but I think it's going to be an interesting game to watch.
I have the Cowboys beating the Ravens. I really like the Cowboys offense. They have a really nice wide receiver trio. They have a solid offensive line. They have one of the better running backs in Ezekiel Elliott, and even if Dak doesn't play, I think Andy Dalton is good enough to helm the talent that he has around them and get them to, at least the playoffs. And then I think I've said before, the Dallas defense, when they're firing on all cylinders, they're pretty damn good. So
by firing on all cylinders, you mean only playing the Giants?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the Cowboys are going to upset the Ravens.
All right. So you have the Ravens winning 10 in a row and then losing 2 straight.
Yep.
All right. Week 14 matchup at Cleveland. I already have them losing to the Browns once. I'm not going to make that mistake again. And I also think at this point we're going to run into that really classic Browns end of season meltdown. So I have the Ravens winning that game in Cleveland.
This might be a surprise, but I have them losing their 3rd straight game.
Come on.
I think that, I made some points about how the Browns aren't going to be there together and all that kind of stuff week 1. But I think this far into the season, the Browns are going to figure out who they are. And I think being in a Kevin Stefanski offense, he's going to bring out what this offense should have been when Freddie Kitchens was running it last year. And I think with the talent that they have on offense and defense, I think they're going to at least get 1 from the Ravens.
All right. Well, I mean, we can agree that they're going to get 1. All right. Week 15 matchup against Jacksonville. I have them winning this game. Mitch, I'm assuming you have them losing this. Jacksonville, I like Gardner Minshew at quarterback. I love him. I don't think Jacksonville has the ability to keep up with him. This is an easy win for the Ravens.
Yep, this is an easy win. This might be a little controversial, but I think the Ravens are going to do to the Jacksonville Jaguars what they did to the Dolphins.
Yeah, they might at that point, honestly. Maybe that's why they're keeping Doug Marrone around, just so that they have someone to blame. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a bloodbath. Week 16 matchup, they host the New York Giants. Again, Giants to me are in a little bit of the same boat as Jacksonville. They're a little bit more developed, but questions all across the board, offseason issues in the secondary, questions on the offensive line still, questions at the wide receiver position. Who knows what they're going to look like? The Giants could be an 8-8 team. They could be a 1-15 team. Who really knows? And with a little bit of an extremely unproven head coach in Joe Judge there, I'm giving this to the Ravens easily.
Yeah, another easy one for the Ravens. I don't think the Giants are there yet. I still think they're in the process of rebuilding their team to get it back to, where they were winning Super Bowls and such. So I think the Ravens will win easily.
Okay, all right. And then Week 17 matchup at Cincinnati. Same reason I give them the win against the Bengals in Week 5. I give it to them again in Week 17. I don't think the Bengals are going to be there in order to beat the Ravens.
Yeah, Joe Burrow's still the quarterback, so Ravens win.
All right, so we got there a little bit funny. Didn't agree on any of the losses, but we both have the Ravens going 13-3 again next season. Not again. They went 14-2 last season. So they end up taking a one-game step back, but we still both have them fighting for what would be the number 1 seed in the AFC typically. Now, we'll break down our full playoff picture and everything, but it is interesting that once again we come pretty much neck and neck. We agreed last week with the Falcons going 4-12, and now we have the Ravens going 13-3.
Yeah, it looks like minds think alike.
Yeah, right? Obviously I don't have them losing 3 straight because I don't see how on earth they would do that. But who knows? Nobody had them losing to the Titans besides people in Tennessee. So, it'll definitely be interesting. Next week, we definitely have a really interesting team to break down, the Buffalo Bills. This is kind of our first team where they teeter so much, It's like on one hand, now that Tom Brady's gone in New England, Buffalo looks like they could be it in the AFC East. But on the other hand, Buffalo also looks like they can go 6-10,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I definitely think that, the Buffalo Bills could go 0-16, or they could win it all. So I'm definitely excited to see how, the Bills are going to put everything together after everything that they've added through, free agency in the draft class and, Josh Allen hopefully taking another step. So I think they're going to be an exciting team this year, and they definitely have the best shot in the AFC East to finally win the division and not the New England Patriots.
Yeah, so we'll break down, just like we did this episode, we'll break down what they did last season, their off-season moves, their draft, break down what we think they're going to do next season, whether or not we have them as a playoff contender. Obviously, at 13-3, we have the Ravens making the playoffs, unless 7 other teams go 13-3 next season, the Ravens won't miss the playoffs. But it is interesting that we met up again there. We both did it in very different ways. But yeah, we met up again right at 13-3. I think Buffalo is going to be the week where we're going to have some major changes because we have them at 2 very different levels. The records are a little bit there, but we have them at kind of 2 very different levels. And it's all really going to come down to quarterback play. We heralded Lamar Jackson so much in the quarterback play for this one. Well, now we're going to look at the guy who was drafted a lot earlier than he was in that same draft and see what does his quarterback play look like, So it's definitely going to be interesting. I appreciate everybody for listening. Go back, watch the first 4 episodes. Again, episode 1 and 2, we broke down the NFL schedule, some of the more interesting games. Episode 3, we went over to the Arizona Cardinals. Episode 4, the Falcons. This one, we broke down the Ravens. Next week, we'll break down the Bills. Or next episode, we'll break down the Bills. So, yeah, like, subscribe, comment. Send us an email with your thoughts, whether or not you think Mitch is ridiculous for having them lose 3 in a row, whether or not you think I'm ridiculous for having them lose to Cleveland week 1. Who knows? Who cares? If it's a good comment or it's a good point, we'll read it on air. But again, you can email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's fourth, FOURTH, string SP@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Mitch, you got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, this is a little message out to those Buffalo fans. If you're able to, please send us some videos of you jumping onto tables and breaking them, because I think that is hilarious, and I think that tradition should never stop.
Well, I mean, we'll definitely talk about the Bills Mafia. One of the more heartwarming stories from last season was Pancho Villa and his family and stuff. I think Bills fans are so fun to watch for a team and an organization that has had nothing to root for since the early 90s. They are rabid fans. I love it. So, yeah, Bills fans, let us know. I'm sure we're going to get some flack from you guys. But, yeah, let us know. Otherwise, you guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. And everybody have a fun and a safe night.